Here on an episode of Chordplay, and this is the Chords of Jimi Hendrix, and this is technically part 2. I did do a chord play for Jimi about 2 years ago, and also a 3-for-all last year where we looked at some of his licks. But this is going to be a special look at some of his soul and R&B, chord movements, and some of these really cool ideas that pop up in a lot of Hendrix's music. Little Wing, When Cries Mary, Castles Made of Sand. There's a ton of songs where you can hear these little kind of chord extensions and movements and slides, hammer-ons and pull-offs, and all kinds of cool stuff. But it's really unusual to hear it with chords. Typically you'd find those with lead guitar, but with rhythm guitar, sliding and using legato and all this stuff, it really does create this really interesting sound because you're hearing the chord move. Now, as far as revealing the R&B and soul, influence in Jimi's playing, you have to look at his background. You have to remember before, the Band of Gypsies, before The Experience, even before Jimmy James and the Blue Flames, Jimi was a touring, guitarist. He backed up people like Little Richard, Wilson Pickett, Ike and Tina Turner. There's a whole bunch of people, Sam Cooke. There's a bunch of people that he, backed up and played guitar, and that's where he learned, some of these moves and slides and these little legato movements, within chords, because that's a big part of soul and R&B guitar playing. And Jimi took those ideas and then related them to his blues and rock influenced world and created this brand new approach and style of guitar playing. To give you a kind of a heads up on soul and R&B guitarists, here's a list of some very influential, guitarists. Everybody from, Wah Wah Watson and, of course, the great Curtis Mayfield. Definitely one of the godfathers or originators of soul and R&B, guitar playing. But, the Isley Brothers, there's a whole bunch of people. So check this out. The overall approach for this episode is going to be a little bit different because I'm going to basically supply you with the background information, and kind of show you, what Jimi's tapping into. And then we're going to look at some songs. There are definitely some Hendrix, riffs and songs and chord-based, moments in this lesson. But I wanted to start with giving everybody that's watching this kind of a clue as far as what's going on here, because it is really different. It's very demanding, definitely for your fret hand. And it's going to be a lot different than just holding down a chord and banging it, because you're going to be holding down fragments and partial chords and pieces of chords, and you're going to be moving, sliding, hammer-ons and pull-offs, and all kinds of stuff in there. So it is going to be kind of tricky, especially if you're just used to playing, straight bar chords and power chords. If you're not used to moving and shifting and kind of sliding around, then this is going to be really different for you. The first step here is we're just going to pick a key, and I'm going to start in E minor. So I want you to think of an E minor bar chord right here in the 7th position. Very standard chord. So there's E minor, right? And I want you to look at that shape and the fingering. And then also I want you to think of E minor pentatonic that lives right there. Fretboard, what I want you to do is basically combine the chord with that scale. And you don't really need to combine it, and physically perform it combined, but you want to think of where the chord is and then where the notes of that scale are, and then you're going to basically start smushing those together. The image I just shared showed the chord and then also the scale in that position. And what I want you to do is start thinking of combining, the notes of the chord with the notes from that scale. And we're going to basically break up this chord like this. Alright, so we're starting there, here, here, and here. And then what you're going to do is basically add some of those additional notes from the scale, like this. So right there you have all the possibilities kind of mixed with that chord and the scale. You can grab that D note on the high E, or you can grab the A note there on the B. And then on the G and the B string you could grab the A note, or this E note right there. And on the D and the G, typically Jimmy wouldn't really do it on the lower strings. It was mainly on the higher strings up there. And they were basically just using a hammer-on pull-off just to kind of move through that chord and also the scale too. Now let's take this E minor idea that we just had. Let's move over to B minor now, just to kind of expand this into another, position. So there's B minor, the bar chord, and then also B minor pentatonic right here. And then once again, you have all these, additional notes you can add. Not very musical, but you can definitely hear Jimmy grabbing, parts of those. He wouldn't really go straight down like that. That's not really that interesting. But hearing, those notes kind of twisted and mixed together, just doing stuff like that. And think of Wind Cries Mary. You can kind of hear like the chord. This movement, and that's basically kind of what he's doing. He's moving between notes of the chord and hammering on an additional note. If you know your way around the fretboard and you know pentatonics, then you can definitely flip this to major, and that's technically where you're going to see Jimmy do this more often. I did start with minor keys just to flesh it out, but then when you start shifting toward major, take this B minor chord and let's play it Jimmy style. So now play a B major triad right there, or part of the chord, and then use the fret wrap there with your thumb, and you're going to actually grab that bass note with your thumb there, and then you'll hear that's B major. There's A major. Use that thumb wrap just about anywhere. There's B and A. You can move down and change it to F sharp minor. So that's the first part, getting the thumb wrap. And then the other part is actually using your pinky and getting some of these extensions up there. Like that. Move to A. And you can kind of see just kind of adding these extensions up on top. Now if we take B minor like we had a second ago, move it up a whole step, there's C sharp minor, and if you flip the root to E, then you're basically playing, part of E major right there, and then that C sharp minor pentatonic is going to flip to E major pentatonic. Definitely one of Hendrix's favorite spots, on the fretboard to do this. So there's, the partial E chord, and then there's E major pentatonic. And then we can do the same thing, kind of grab those little pieces and parts. Necessarily play all of those, but you're just kind of expanding and noticing where your options are. Now to take this a step further, we can get away from the box and move back here. So now let's grab E major like that, and there's another position of C minor or C sharp minor pentatonic, but that's also E major pentatonic right here. And we can do the same kind of thing there. Kind of play. Or with the opening, that was Bold as Love from Axis Bold as Love. And Axis is definitely the Hendrix album with the most R&B and soul, rhythmic influence. There's more on that album than any of his original 3, studio albums. There's a little bit on Are You Experienced, Wind Cries Mary, and there's a little bit on Electric Ladyland too. But Axis was just dripping with it. It's like every other song has all these really slick, chord moves and hammer-ons and slides and all this really cool stuff. But with Bold as Love, he's basically using the thumb wrap there for A. And there he's grabbing, you know, a single A, kind of scratched into it, and then a single E scratched into it. And then he's down to E. And he's kind of adding that, you know, the sus4 right there, that A note. And then it's basically F sharp minor. So you can kind of think of the chords there, A to E, F sharp minor to D. But then you hear the movement in those chords like this. Slide. Those two single notes I talked about. Low E open, you're adding that sus4 on E. F sharp minor. And then D. And there you can actually hear him kind of using, you know, some of those things we just looked at. Because there he's basically playing, you know, D over F sharp. Back to that A. Right there he actually does two of those. So right there for A, kind of hammering on the 7th fret there on the B, and then you're moving to this and hammering on the 6th fret on the G. Back to that F sharp minor. And then he really just kind of moves between D, C sharp, back to D. Song, you know, the chord progression is very simple. It's 4 chords, but the way it moves around and the way he's just kind of smearing through that progression, it's really interesting, you know, where it doesn't really sound like just 4 chords. It sounds like a lot more, but that's really all that's happening there. It's just 4 chords, but, you know, treated and played in a, you know, rhythmic kind of soul and R&B way. Our next example is from Wait Till Tomorrow, which is also from Access, and something like this. It's really active, really busy too. And he's basically grabbing these 70s, you know, extensions in the beginning. So that's basically like an A over C sharp, but he's also flirting with that E right there, and that partial E. And he's also, you know, kind of adding that hammer on right there too. So Jimi was a master at doing this because, you know, he would sneak it in all over the place, and half the time you wouldn't even notice it unless it was overly played, like, you know, Little Wing and some of those songs. But even like in songs where you wouldn't really think there would be like an R&B, you know, fill or move, sometimes he would put it in there. But right there, and that's basically flirting with A and E, and then do the exact same thing down a whole step. There's G, and then also this D right there. So you're doing this slowly. Right there, do the thumb wrap A. And then right here, you're basically kind of flirting with this E11. And there's movement right there. You know, really cool. He starts adding like this little funky, you know, single note line in there. back to that little funky, you know, 70s kind of inversion. You know, classic song, and I love that, you know, rhythm part. The guitar part is so cool. Here's something extra I'm going to add here, and this isn't really directly related to a song, but you can find Jimmy and a whole bunch of other guitarists that use some of these sounds. Eric Johnson, there's a whole bunch of people. They basically, you know, kind of use some of the same path or this kind of, you know, highway on the fretboard. So in E minor, we're going to start, and in a minor key, we're going to map out the fretboard on the G and the B string, and we're going to find these little connecting, you know, fingerings there. So start with the open G and open B, which is related to the key because it's E minor. And grab this A and D, grab this B and E, slide up and grab this D and G, E and A, there's G and B again, kind of a mirror of the open strings. Then there's A and G, or A and D again, and B and E. So right there, flip that to major, and we're just going to basically kind of rework the idea. So now think of E major, and now you've got that's really interesting, and you'll definitely hear Jimmy, you know, playing with some of those slides. Definitely hear, you know, hammer-ons and pull-offs mixed with those slides, and that's usually what they're sliding. It's just on the G and the B. That's why I've kind of focused on, you know, adding this to the lesson, because that way you can kind of see, you know, where those slides are. And you can definitely do it on other strings. But I have found a lot of players using that G and B highway. The last example is from the very famous Castles Made of Sand from Axis Boldest Love. This is one of my favorite Hendrix songs. And I know when I first learned this, I think I was in college. And it just blew my mind because I'd never played anything like that before. I'd kind of toyed with Little Wing a little bit around that same time. And Little Wing's also a showcase. I mean, that's a great song to learn. But I chose Castles Made of Sand simply because it seems like everybody, you know, mentions Little Wing or plays Little Wing. And some of the songs that I selected or played, you know, in this lesson are kind of, I mean, they're definitely famous, but they're not really as famous as Little Wing. And Castles Made of Sand's no exception. Something like this. So there's a lot happening here, and he's definitely blurring that line between soul and R&B and blues, and there's just this real syrupy, you know, interesting thing happening. So it's all implied chords, loosely based around G. That's kind of like a what, G sus2 kind of. There's some interesting things happening right there. You know, just a little second of A minor 7, and then he's also grabbing that F note right there too. So it's kind of, you know, just an interesting little twist in the progression. And then right there, thumb rap G. It's a thumb rap G, and then you're kind of moving into this, you know, B flat over D, and then you're sliding in and grabbing the C over E right there. You're kind of ending with that C over B flat, you know. It was just so cool. And when Jimmy played that, he has this real relaxed, laid back, you know, feel. It's not hyperactive and intense. It's real mellow, you know, and that's I think that comes across when you hear it, because it just relaxes you, where it's like, wow, and you just kind of get lost in this syrupy chord world, you know, of Jimi Hendrix. That's going to wrap this second look at the chords of Jimi Hendrix with the soul and R&B, you know, kind of influence. And definitely, I mean, Hendrix is a very important guitar legend. He's influenced millions and millions of guitarists, myself included. And I know when I was in high school and I was listening to Racer X and Yngwie and Steve Vai and all this stuff, I mean, I knew who Hendrix was, but I didn't really fall into his music until right around the time I started, you know, going to college. And I had some friends that were into him and some Zeppelin. And the next thing I knew, you know, it was like it was like a light turned on, or a light bulb came on. And it was like one minute the Hendrix light was off, and then the next minute it was like flames. You know, I couldn't get enough. And I fell into his playing and started studying some of his music. One of my instructors at AIM, you know, down in Atlanta, was a big Hendrix fan. And Sid Wolf, basically. And Sid definitely sparked my interest in Hendrix, because he could play and he could talk about all this stuff, the history, what he was doing, why he was doing it. And I just was mesmerized. I thought, oh my gosh, I have to learn as much as I can about Jimi Hendrix. And I've definitely read books. I've studied a lot of his music. I've, you know, worked on his music with bands and students over the years. So he's essential. I mean, you have to spend some time with Jimmy at some point. And if you don't, that's okay. But I definitely recommend everybody should sit down and listen to Hendrix, you know, work on some of his songs, and just tear it apart, because it's just loaded with all these great ideas, left field ideas, cool like studio, you know, recording ideas and effects and all this stuff, you know, just essential. So anyway, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.